Ontario is the chair of the Philosophy Department of Worcester State University in the United States and co-editor-in-chief of the peer-reviewed journal Genocide Studies and Prevention. His research focuses on the philosophical approaches to genocide issues, especially genocide denial, long-term justice, and the role of violence against women in genocide. Professor Terrio was also a member of the Armenian Genocide Preparation Study Group, which was established with the objective of determining alternative, just resolutions of the Armenian genocide and of producing legal and ethical proposals for the reparation process. Please join me in welcoming an expert on genocide studies and prevention, Professor Henry Terrio.
Let me begin by saying how deeply honored I am to be included in this solemn and tremendously important event. I really appreciate the chance to share this moment with all of you and recognize how important it is that people come together as a group to deal with such a horrible human tragedy as the Armenian genocide. I want to especially thank the organizers of this event and single out particularly Brant Mugerdician of the Armenian National Committee, who with the others he works with, demonstrate exactly why eventually the truth will triumph. Because their commitment, their talent, and their integrity are things that can't be bought, no matter how much money the Republic of Turkey and its supporters spend. I'd also like to express how my tremendous gratitude and esteem for the members of the national and state level parliaments who are here tonight. As political leaders, elected political leaders, they have a special place in Australian society that no one else has. And in the way that they demonstrate their commitment to this issue, sets an ethical standard for the society in Australia and for the global human society to follow. We can never overstate how important it is that they take principled stands on issues like this. And we can never overstate how much it shows about their character, that they put ethical considerations above party politics and other issues, and take a stand in a case where it would be very easy to turn a blind eye and follow others who refuse to deal with the horrible side of history. Finally, I'd like to single out Professor Colin Tefts, who is perhaps very well known in Australia, but you should know also very well known around the world as a leading genocide scholar, as someone who helped create the field of genocide studies, which has been very important in bringing this issue to the forefront of human rights and political discussion around the world. His work is one of the ways that Australia has tremendously contributed to very important aspects of global culture, politics, and ethics. And I applaud him and I applaud Australia for what he represents. I want to talk today about what the Armenian genocide means today and in the future. Although it's very important to look at the past, we have to understand that this is an issue that is a contemporary issue. And I want to touch on a number of points that I think are important for us to remember and to think about as we go forward. The first is that Assyrians and Greeks absolutely must be included in any discussion of the Armenian genocide. The process in the Ottoman Empire was a broad genocidal process that was not limited to one group. The ideology underlying it was so destructive that it was not meant for just one group. And in fact, in a very practical sense, Armenians especially should recognize this. Not only is there an ethical imperative to join with other groups who have been similarly victimized, but when confronting denial, and one of the great denial arguments that Armenians caused what happened to them, that their to blame for revolting in Van and in other places, we have to ask a very simple question. If Armenians were to blame, why were Greeks and Assyrians also targeted? The answer is very simple. Armenians weren't to blame, neither were Greeks or Assyrians. They were killed, tortured, raped, and their communities destroyed because of the groups they belonged to, not anything they did. A second thing we have to understand is that as long as a genocide is left unacknowledged and the society that committed it doesn't go through a process of acknowledging and rehabilitating itself, the attitudes that underlie the genocide and that caused it to happen stay deeply embedded within that society. And even the best people in that society, acting out of the most moral principles imaginable, cannot change that. Turkey has not gone through that process. And again, we see evidence of that mentality underlying its political and military institutions, which were, after all, built by many people who were participants in the Armenian, Greek, and Assyrian genocide. We can see that attitude come out in various ways. The 2007 assassination of Hrant Dink, who was an Armenian Turkish journalist who dared to talk about the Armenian genocide without ever pushing the issue beyond a simple request for acknowledgement from the Turkish state and society. We can see it in the treatment of the Kurds starting in the 1980s and running through for decades to the present, where 3,000 and more villages were razed to the ground and tens of thousands of people killed. We can see it in the blockade of Armenia by Turkey, which has persisted for 20 years, against numerous condemnations from the international community. We also have to understand that one of the legacies of the Armenian genocide that persists today is that it made Armenians, Greeks, and Assyrians fit targets for violence. And not only Hrant Dink. One of the most striking examples of this for me is the case of Karabakh, where Armenians were discriminated against and challenged that discrimination in the 1980s. Because of the attitude that was prevalent in the region, and because of the political connection between Azerbaijan and Turkey, the solution for the Azeri government was quite simple. We can kill Armenians when we decide to, because it's okay to kill Armenians. And that's exactly what began in the 1990s. This is not unique to Armenians and others in the Ottoman Empire. Andrew Smith, a Native American scholar in the United States, has talked about how the genocide of Native American groups in North America rendered the women and girls of those societies inherently rapeable, because rape was such an important factor in the destruction of those communities. And explains that that accounts for why the rate of rape of Native American women in the United States is dramatically higher than for many other groups. David Norman Smith, also a scholar in the United States, has made a similar point about the Holocaust, and the fact that one of the ironic and tragic consequences of the Holocaust is, despite all the condemnations, the trials, and the commitments to protect Jews against anti-Semitism that followed the Holocaust, for many people in the world, it made Jews more killable. It created the possibility of mass murder of Jews. And that we see this coming through in the various ways that anti-Semitism persists as a virulent form and a danger to Jews today. I also want to stress that the Armenian genocide did not end in 1923. And there are many ways people talk about the continuation of the genocide, through denial and through other factors. One of the most important for me is the way that it entrenched a great power differential between Armenians and Turks, and between the two states that have followed. In the impunity of denial, in the ways in which the Armenian Republic has to fear the Republic of Turkey, the ways in which the security of Armenians is constantly under threat, the poverty in Armenia, and in many other ways, we can see the legacy of the Armenian genocide. We can also see it in the fact that every single day, Armenians in Armenia and around the world have to make an effort to reaffirm their identity and to keep their identity in a way that people in Turkey and in many other societies around the world don't need to. This takes a constant effort, a constant will, and while it has its positive side in keeping people focused on their identity and on the issues of their history, the toll on Armenian communities and individuals is massive and detracts many people from oftentimes enjoying the basic pleasures of life and the kind of time that they would like to spend with families and friends. I know I've seen many Armenians show a tremendous commitment to the issues out of a heartfelt and sincere wish to bear witness to the memory of the survivors and those killed in the Armenian genocide. And I've seen how many sacrifices they've made in Australia and around the world. And we can't forget what that means. When we think about the Armenian genocide of the past, it is absolutely crucial to understand the ways in which it impacts Armenians today, even beyond what I just discussed. The deaths of Armenians nearly 100 years ago have also meant that all the people who have been born as their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren never came to exist. All the pleasures of life they would have known and all that they would have done for the Armenian community has been taken out of existence even before it began to exist. We can't forget the trauma of rampant rape, torture, and destruction that was visited on Armenians. When we saw the film and think about what it meant for a child, a very young child, to go through what he did, and how even as an older man, he broke down in tears to remember what it meant for him to go through this horrible experience, we understand just how deeply this continues to affect the Armenian community. We also have to understand the destruction of Armenian institutions, religious institutions, cultural, educational, business, and so forth. And how important those are. We know, especially as we think about our friends in Parliament here today, how much effort they spend to build the infrastructure of Australian society, to be able to give a basis for average individuals in that society to have decent lives, and to understand how all of that was destroyed for Armenians in the Ottoman Empire. And we also have to understand, in a more maybe crass way, the way in which Armenian wealth, material wealth, was taken. The kind of wealth, I'm not talking about extravagant riches, but I'm talking about little plots of land. I'm talking about clothes off people's back. I'm talking about all the things we need to continue to live in our daily lives, taken from Armenians, amassed by the Turkish state and leading perpetrators of the genocide as their own personal fortunes, and as some Turks in the Turkish Republic are now saying today, as the basis of the economy of the Turkish Republic of the 20th century. When we think about and reflect on all those harms that were done, we can't help but understand how they impact Armenians today. When one looks at the poverty in the Armenian Republic today, when one looks at its difficult military, political, and cultural situation, when one sees what happens to diasporan communities as they try to preserve identity in a world where Armenians are a very, very small minority, separated from one another through great geographical distances, we understand the living legacy of the Armenian genocide and how much of an impact still needs to be addressed today. It's because of that impact